Hello, and welcome to Intermediate English with Gregg. That's me. So, let's get started. Well, let's warm up with the weather.
Gregg, how's the weather today?
The high temperature will be about 25 degrees. The high temperature will be about 25 degrees. I think this is very simple, but let's check the board. Of course, for our question today, how's the weather? I decided to talk about the temperature. Right? I'm talking about, in this case, the high temperature. Right? So, of course, the high temperature will be, and then, of course, this will be case by case. 25 degrees, 30 degrees, maybe in the winter, 8 degrees, whatever the high temperature is. Right? Now, using the word temperature is an option, but actually you don't need it. People often just say the high will be 25 degrees. Now, also here, the word here, Celsius, sometimes people will write, of course, this, but when people speak, you don't have to use that word Celsius. Right? So, this, of course, also an option. Oops. Right? Using the word Celsius is an option. Right? So the high temperature will be something. Right? Now, let's practice today's easy phrase. If you know today's high temperature, please include that in your answer. So, how's the weather today? I see. Great. Now, for today's lesson. Well, for today's lesson, we're going to talk about the final part of changes. In our two previous lessons, we used the idea used to and didn't used to talk about changes. Right? We also used the idea in the second lesson talking about more, fewer, and less. Right? And today we're going to talk about the third pattern you can use to talk about changes. And it's very simple. We're going to talk about the idea is becoming versus has become. Right? Now, maybe you already understand the difference, but we use is becoming when something is still in the process. It has not finished. It is continuing. We use has become when we have reached the end of that process. So maybe in Japanese, it's like the feeling nani nani ni natteru, or has become is nani nani ni natte kita. Is maybe the nuance of it. And by the way, we use the word becoming. You can also use the word getting. Is another option. Now, to talk about this, is becoming and has become, of course, you can talk about people, you can talk about place, or you can talk about a thing. So, I have here 8 ideas about people, places, and things. Now, of course, maybe you have your own ideas, and that's great. The first two, talking about people. One, talking about yourself. For example, this idea, I'm becoming, for example, I'm becoming more forgetful. Maybe I forget more and more things, my schedule for today, or where I put something. I'm becoming more forgetful. Or talking about other people, for example, Osaka Naomi, of course, the tennis player. Maybe Osaka Naomi has become For example, that Osaka Naomi has become one of the best tennis players in the world. Well, she has recently just won the Australian Open, so she has become one of the best. So these are changes with, of course, maybe people. We also use this to talk about places. For example, talking about your hometown of Yamanaka. Now this is just an idea, but maybe Yamanaka is becoming, for example, it's becoming more international. Okay? Now, of course, recently, this past year of 2020 and perhaps this year, 2021, maybe not as much. But in years before that, and maybe again years from now, maybe Yamanaka will continue to become more international. Or, for example, here they talk about China's economy. China's economy has become for example, China's economy has become the largest in the world. Of course, economy, perhaps you understand you are talking about that keizai or for many years, America was the largest economy in the world, but now China's economy has become the largest. It is at the end of that process. Or something about, very simple, maybe we're talking about the school. And for example, the school is becoming, smaller. Now, of course, the school building is not becoming smaller, but maybe the number of students is becoming smaller. So we can talk about places. We can also talk about things. For example, maybe about your English. Maybe recently you have not had a chance to use your English, so maybe my English has become rusty. Of course, the word rust in Japanese is sabi. And of course, like any machine or a bicycle or something that you don't use for a long time, it accumulates rust. And maybe it's a little difficult to use. But we can also use it about, for example, English. My English has become rusty. I have not used it for a long time. Or we could talk about maybe the weather. Like today we were talking about the high temperature will be 25 degrees. For example, you could say it is becoming warmer day by day. Of course, today is February, the end of February, so spring is coming, so maybe the temperature is becoming warmer day by day. Or, for example, talking about a season. Unfortunately, for many people, the negative point about spring is it's also the hay fever season. So it has become the hay fever season. And of course, hay fever is that kafunsho. So, unfortunately, many people suffer from hay fever. But we're using these two patterns to talk about something that is changing, or something that has changed. Whether it's in the process or it has completed the process. Maybe you can use these ideas to talk about yourself, to talk about your hometown, to talk about your house, maybe your business, or just other things around you. Now, as a final point, if you notice in the words here, becoming, in English, they're often going to use this idea So we don't use the word, we'll often use the word to compare the past to now. So they'll often use the pattern more forgetful or more international, or using the ER pattern, smaller, warmer. It's often used in that way. Now, that is all for today, but our next and final lesson, we will review these points in a simple conversation, talking about some changes. But until then, see you next time.